Remember, we have the three types of arteries, the elastic, the muscular, and the arterioles. We just looked at elastic. Let's take a look at muscular now. These are medium-sized. Remember, elastic were like interstate highways. Those were the big, giant arteries in your body that took blood to whole regions of your body. The medium-sized arteries, the state highways, those little two-lane highways, those are the muscular arteries. They have a lumen of around 0.3 millimeters, maybe up to 10 millimeters. They have thickest tunica media relatively, lots of smooth muscle. They are active in vasoconstriction and vasodilation. They distribute blood to specific body regions and organs. So not as broad a region as the elastics, a more limited, narrower region. So these are most of the arteries that have names. So the splenic artery, the renal artery, radial, common hepatic, femoral, tibial. These are most of the arteries running all through your body. Not the really huge ones like the pulmonary trunk and the aorta and the common carotid. These are the smaller arteries that go to very specific parts of your body. Those are the muscular arteries. There you can see in the illustration that thick, smooth muscle wall. There you see the splenic artery. Lots of smooth muscle in that artery wall. And then finally, arterioles. These are the smallest of the arteries. These are like city streets, all right? We went from interstate highways to state highways to city streets, okay? 10 microns to 0.3 millimeters, so this is like ultra-fine pencil lead. That's the biggest they are. The smaller ones are microscopic. You can't even see them with the naked eye. They determine exactly which tissues get blood and how much. They're the ones that supply blood to specific little parts. They regulate vascular resistance. They significantly regulate blood pressure. So like when we talk about peripheral vasoconstriction, we're mostly talking about arterioles. When they clamp down, you can see there in the diagram in the lower left, the smooth muscle cell, they clamp down and they can really constrict those arterioles. That's how we dramatically change our blood pressure. Scanning electron microscope, a picture of neuron innervating smooth muscle on an arteriole. That's the way like the sympathetic nervous system works, okay? You got smooth muscle on the outside of the arteriole, and there you can see a nerve going right to the smooth muscle. So sympathetic nervous system kicks in, you release some acetylcholine there, and the muscle constricts. And then finally capillaries. These are the tiniest blood vessels in your body. Endothelium plus basement membrane. They don't have those three layers. There's no externa and media and interna. No tunica media, no tunica externa. Diameter 8 to 11 microns. So these are microscopic. These are tiny, tiny, tiny. Just large enough for a red blood cell. You probably don't remember, but red blood cells are maybe around 7 microns in diameter. So they're basically just large enough for a red blood cell to squeeze through. Average length is only 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter is smaller than most people think. Those little tiny, on the palm of your hand, you got those little tiny lines. A lot of those are around 1 millimeter. That's about how big these capillaries are, okay? Average length of a capillary would be the width of the line on your hand. So these are very, very small in length. And in diameter, they're microscopic. They're intentionally leaky, all right? They're ideal for exchange with the tissue. So all those nutrients in your blood, all right, the glucose and the amino acids and stuff like that, they are getting out through the capillaries, which have these gaps in them. You can see in the lower right there, a thin endothelial cell wall, only one cell thick. And as a result, they're very leaky, and they're supposed to be leaky. That's how the nutrients get out. So, function of capillaries: exchange of materials between blood and the interstitial fluid. All right? Blood doesn't deliver things directly to a cell. The nutrients leak out of the capillary into the interstitial fluid, and then the nutrients are taken up by the cell. All right? Now, at the same time, by the way, that the nutrients leak out, water leaks out as well. So, look in that lower right diagram. You can see you've got capillaries there, a capillary bed. There's an arteriole on one side. Those are the little small arteries. A venule on the other. Those are the little tiny veins. We haven't talked about those yet, but Those are the smallest veins. In between the arteriole and the venule is the capillary bed. And notice they show it kind of purplish because that's where arterial blood is going to get picked up by the vein and taken back. So what's happening is the oxygen and the nutrients are leaking out, and the blood is becoming deoxygenated. So notice the stuff is going to leak out into the ISF, but there are cells all over the place. The cells are going to be picking up the nutrients. Water is also going to be leaking out, and look at, you've got lymphatic vessels right there in order to pick up the water. So that's what's going on. That's why capillaries always have little lymphatic capillaries all around them. That's in order to recover the water and even some of the waste products. So most tissues have a rich capillary supply. Exceptions are tendons, cornea, and cartilage. So the cornea doesn't have any blood vessels in it. It gets oxygen directly from the atmosphere. Tendons and cartilage are poorly vascularized, and that's why they don't heal very well. They're notorious for taking a long time to heal. A lot of times cartilage damage, they just go in and cut it out because the stuff hardly ever heals. It doesn't have a blood supply to do that. Higher the metabolic requirement, the more extensive the capillary network. So, places that really use a lot of oxygen and glucose, they're going to have much more extensive capillary networks. And the blood flow through the capillary bed is regulated by the arteriole. So remember, the arteriole are the ones mostly responsible in controlling blood pressure. They have the most vasoconstriction and vasodilation. So as they vasodilate and vasoconstrict, that will control blood going into the capillaries. So capillary beds, 10 to 100 capillaries per capillary bed. So you see the illustrations there. Rule of thumb is the blood flows through only 25% of a capillary bed at any time. The reason for that is that you've got so many capillaries that if the blood were to flow through all of them, you wouldn't have any blood left over for anything else. You wouldn't be able to even fill all of your capillary beds. So through vasoconstriction, etc., only part of the capillary bed is active at any one moment. So in other words, blood flows through one part of the capillary bed, and then a few moments later, it'll flow through a different part of the capillary bed, and so on and so on. So the entire capillary bed will get blood. It's just the entire bed doesn't get it all at the same time. It kind of alternates where it goes within the bed. Roughly 10 billion capillaries in an adult body, more than 25,000 miles. Remember, your total blood vessels were something like 60,000 miles. So roughly half of all the blood vessels in your body are capillaries. And that's because that's where we're actually doing the nutrient exchange. That's where the nutrients and, the oxygen, the glucose, all that is getting out, the amino acids. So it makes sense. That's the most important thing the blood is doing, is delivering that stuff to your body. So it makes sense that capillaries would make up almost half of all the blood vessels in your body. All those other arteries are just getting it to the capillaries so the nutrients can get out. And at any given time, only 5% of your blood is in your capillaries. Once again, that's because if the capillaries were full, you would use up all the blood in your body. You wouldn't have enough blood in your body to fill all the capillaries. So again, there's a shunting effect going on where the flow of blood through the capillaries is being regulated so that only part of the capillary bed has blood in it at any one moment. All right, but it's always changing so that over the course of a few moments, the whole thing will eventually get blood. Now, capillaries have 3 different flavors, 3 different types. Let's take a look at those. Continuous capillaries are the most common by far. Those are most of the ones throughout your entire body. Endothelium is uninterrupted, all right? It's just constant endothelium, all right? They're leaky, all right? Nutrients can get out. They're seen in muscles, nerves, connective tissue, lung, brain, most of the tissues of your body. Then there are capillaries called fenestrated capillaries. Fenestra in Latin means window. So you can see in the illustration at the bottom there, the capillary has little windows in it. So fenestrated capillaries are capillaries that can allow even bigger things to get out, bigger than the normal nutrients. So the large pores are called fenestrations, windows, essentially. Where do you see fenestrated capillaries? Places like endocrine glands, intestinal villi, Villi are little projections in the intestine where you absorb nutrients, the pancreas and the kidney. Can you see why those places would have fenestrated capillaries? What's happening in endocrine glands? That's where hormones have to get into the blood, so you need a big opening. They have to get out of the blood and get into the blood. Intestinal villi, that's where you're absorbing nutrients, so big nutrients have to be able to get in. The pancreas, you're secreting hormones there, like insulin and glucagon, and the kidney filters your blood. So the kidney has to let waste products get through, all right? So fenestrated capillaries are found in places where you need bigger openings because there are bigger things that have to get in and out of the blood. Important for absorption, secretion, and filtration, right? That's what's going on, things getting in and out. And then sinusoidal capillaries, these where the endothelial cells are discontinuous, these have huge gaps, all right? Big, giant openings. And where do you need those? Where do you find them? In the liver, the spleen, and the bone marrow. And what's going on in the liver, spleen, and bone marrow that would require really big openings? Yeah, that's where whole red blood cells get in and out. Remember, you make red blood cells in your bone marrow, so they have to get into the blood there. And then remember, your liver and your spleen filter your blood, and they recycle old used up red blood cells. So whole red blood cells have to be able to get in and out. So those are three of the places, main places, where you'll see the big, huge sinusoidal capillaries. And there you see a diagram showing on the left continuous, all right, in the middle fenestrated. They got a lot of windows. And then look on the right, sinusoidal have big, huge gaps in the capillary that let entire red blood cells in and out, okay? Nice summary slide right here. Once again showing on the far left, the continuous, they have only tiny gaps. The fenestrated in the middle have bigger gaps, windows. And then on the far right, the sinusoidal, huge gaps to let whole red blood cells in and out. Most named arteries, for example, brachial, gastric, fibular, etc., are what? Are they elastic, muscular, pulmonary, arterioles, or capillaries? Yeah, they are muscular arteries.